volunteers will come get them from you later. And make sure that you indicate whom you are addressing your question to. Okay? So let's jump right in with our first question, which is for Miri. You're an expert in traumatic invalidation and its intersection with anti-Semitism. We would like for you to discuss this concept in the framework of what we just watched.
Still breathing from the movie. Whew. Okay, so traumatic invalidation is a term that was coined by Marshall Linehan. It was examined by Melanie Harney. It's part of evidence-based trauma therapy. And the idea behind traumatic invalidation is that when someone is telling you about their trauma, the response is, this was your fault, or it didn't happen. It can lead to emotional neglect, ignoring, denial of truth. When you look at traumatic invalidation over time, the impact can lead to PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. It can lead to self-harm, to suicidality, to anxiety, to depression, to pervasive insecurity. There's a lot of mental health aspect of it. What we've been seeing in the movie and what they're talking about is really the part that when the world is not believing you, it's not just one person. Right? So in my work, I work a lot with people with sexual trauma, and would often say, my parents' reaction was not what I expected, or they didn't understand me. We're talking about a global reaction. We're talking about community. When it's happening from everywhere around you, it can create really an existential crisis. It can lead to the belief that I don't matter. Nothing about me matters. And the intersection that I see between that and anti-Semitism is that if that would happen to any other group, any other minority, any other person that experienced sexual trauma that is not Jewish, we would see a different reaction. People would be acknowledging that. They would react to that. But instead, because it's Jewish people, Israelis, there is silence. People are questioning that it even happened, even though we saw all the evidence. This is just a little bit of the evidence. The evidence were piling and piling, and people were still questioning that. Why? In what other community do we see that we don't believe women? So this is traumatic invalidation and anti-Semitism at the same time.
Thank you. So for Anila, can you speak to your experience within the Muslim community fighting against sexual assault denial and for women's rights? And what have you gone through since October 7th in the community with your defense of Israeli women as you fight to acknowledge their assaults?
Well, first of all, thank you for screening this. I think it's very important. If you're a woman, you need to see this. On October 7th, I was sitting comfortably in my apartment in Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden, my phone got jammed with these messages, and my friends, of course, globally, Israel, is sending me what's happening, and then videos, and then this friend of mine who's a lawyer, and a very distinguished lawyer in Washington, D.C., he started saying, Anila, you have friends, you have Jewish friends, and I'm sorry, you have Israeli friends, and then back and forth about the history. And I knew at that time that something's going in the wrong direction. And then I said, this is it, but it doesn't matter what happened before. The fact is, Hamas attacked them and raped all these women. And then he said, but don't you think these women deserved it? And he's a lawyer of high repute. And I looked at my phone and, I just left everything and I said, oh my gosh, that is what I'm going to see next. That my community is going to come out with the hatred that they have borne for the Jewish and Israeli community for the longest, years. Unending hatred, anger, animosity. They're going to turn it into denial. And they're going to say this. We had already been fighting, countering violent extremism since 9/11 as mothers, going into patriarchal organizations that exist here, started out in California, and saying, no, that's not Islam. We have our kids, they're being called terrorists. Let's get together and let's talk about what Islam really is. This is not Islam. This is a toxic, violent ideology working with government. And was this going to happen again, that they were going to blame October 7th on Jews and Israel? That's exactly what happened. So what I feared on that day, and I was looking at my phone and seeing these messages, the same thing happened. My board members, many of them lived in California, they were all here. On October 7th, they started sending me messages and saying, no, but are you sure? Israel makes things up. What? Yes, 9/11, remember? The Jews did it. San Bernardino, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. I do. Because I was with LAPD, the Sheriff's Department. We were picking up the bodies of the people killed by this hater. We knew what would happen in our community, and sure enough, that happened in our community. People started saying, your organization needs to send out a press release supporting the Palestinians. And I said, October 7th was started by Hamas. This is the time for us to tell the truth. That's what we have to do as Muslims, as citizens of the world, and as women, for God's sake. Then I was told, these women didn't get raped. And I thought about, my daughter's friends who've been assaulted on so many of these California campuses, and they never told us. They told us years later. Why? Because they thought nobody would believe them. And for us, her father would probably say, come home, you're not going to college. Our trauma is very deep. Like you were saying, we just don't have to worry about what the global community is going to say. We worry about what people are going to say in our community when things like that happen. And yes, at that moment, my board members were all told to resign when they started going to the mosque. A lot of them are mosque going in California, a lot of them. They were told, oh, you belong to that organization, you're supporting Anila. You have to resign from that organization or you can't enter the mosque. And then they would come back and say, need Palestinian people, that is why I support the Abraham Accords. This is not about that right now. This is about terrorists, criminals using Allah's words, Allahu Akbar, the holiest words in our religion. And killing and raping people. And this is not new. This is not new. We've known this to happen. We've known this to happen in wars. You remember the Bosnia?
What was that?
Bosnia,
Yes.
Serbia, okay? The Ottomans, the Armenian genocide. Look it up. Women are the first people to get attacked. We are used. And so if, as a woman and a women's organization, if I can't stand with the women, and yes, there were lots of naysayers and saying, no, it didn't happen. But they were also the same ones who said 9/11 never happened. So there's a connection. And after I was blasted through the waves, my children were targeted. My daughter, who was going to school at that time, newly got married, and my son, all living in California, they were ostracized and said, your mom did this, your mom's saying this. They were all targeted. Anyone who knew anyone I knew was targeted. Here, right here in America. A lot less globally, more so in America. Then we got together, my colleague Surabin is here, she's also with AMMWEC and she's running Muslim Women Speakers, and we said, what can we do? And we're going to go and bear witness. We are going to come back and say to our Muslim brothers and sisters, tell me, have you been to Gaza? Have you been to the kibbutz? Have you spoken to the victims? I have. I have seen what happened. I have listened to their stories. And that's exactly what we did. At the risk of everything, we knew our organization's gone, everything's gone. But we're going to do this because we want to come back and bear witness and live to tell this story. The girl that you saw, Hamid Swasan, she said one thing to us. She said, let's tell our story. Don't let it die. Because her story is the story of many Muslim women too. who got raped, many of whom we've helped, many victims of domestic violence in our community, Muslim community. And if we're not going to do that as women, then shame on us. So to answer that question, sorry.
That's what you've been through.
Thank you very much. That's a good segue possibly into the next question, is how you both deal with the issue of whataboutism, okay, and that has arisen, especially in response to October 7th.
I feel like whataboutism is one of the most painful parts of it all. And again, I say that under traumatic invalidation. I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's interesting. The response that I got every time I talk about the trauma of October 7th is, but what about the Palestinians? But what about? And to me, I'm a DBT therapist, which means I do dialectic work. Being able to hold both truth is so important. And because of traumatic invalidation, now when I give talks in different communities, I always say, I'm pro-Palestinian and I'm pro-Israelis. I can hold both. It's not a competition of pain and suffering. But the fact that I need to say it out loud is a result of what society did to us. I'm not supposed to say it out loud. I'm a human being. I'm a trauma expert. Of course, I'm holding pain for Palestinians. Of course. So the problem with the whataboutism, that I can't even say this word. The problem with that is that it's also creating a polarization. And to your point about extremism, I work a lot in the community of extremism and trying to pull people out of it. The us versus them is becoming an issue, and it's polarizing our society. This is a problem. This is not just a Jewish problem. This is a problem for all of us, right? When we stop believing people, when we stop holding pain for people, and we're questioning their trauma instead of asking them, how can we help you? What can I do to support you? Instead, we're saying, oh, this didn't happen to you, or it wasn't that bad, or like you said, well, they deserved it. Then where are we as society? Where are we as human beings? And the other issue with that, if we don't hold this double standard, is that it's creating more extremism, and other societies can start using rape as a weapon of war because nobody's doing anything about it. And we're seeing it happening again and again and again. So I can't stress enough how much this is not just a Jew problem. This is for all of us. And the other piece of the world, I cannot say this word, it's not going to work. I'm going to call it double standard from now on.
Whataboutism?
Whataboutism? Ooh, thank you, Sarah. Whataboutism? The other issue with that, which I heard, we've seen with some of those events, the event here and other events that I've been to, is that people assume that if we're holding space for this type of trauma, we're automatically against other trauma, right? I mean, I heard that this event, people were protesting against it and were commenting against it. This is psychology trauma. How can you protest against it? How are you not studying that? Why is Jewish pain doesn't matter? When we're starting using nationality and religion and identity as kind of like the hierarchy of empathy, then we're losing humanity.
I need you in my life.
You've got her.
I mean, this is so serious, and it takes me every time we watch this. We live those moments again. It's not just about believe Israeli women. That's what we were told. Go search. We go to this on the kibbutzim. We went to the Negev desert. We went to Ofakim. We went to the Negev desert. And Negev desert has black Israelis. But they're Muslims. They're 250,000 Muslim black people. And they looked to us. And the women came and they hugged us because we had come at a time when nobody was believing them. They were Muslims. And we sat down, all of us. They had cooked a feast for us when they were hurting. This dog type that you see, that's a Muslim. So the commander told us, we're going to meet this Gazan. He's married to a girl from the Negev desert. He had gone to to meet his family with his wife and his 9th child in the car. 9th child, the baby, who was like a few months old. And he related his story to us, Ahmad. And he was scared at that time because he was Gaza and he thought like his life was in danger. His family, anyone who was connected to him, Gaza was in danger. He told us his story that he was coming back with his wife and his 9th child. When he got into the kibbutzim, the Hamas terrorists were there. They stopped him. His wife wears a hijab. And he got up and he started shouting in Arabic, no, I'm a Muslim, my wife is a muhajjaba. Don't kill her. Don't kill her. They didn't care. They came to her side. They shot her 32 times from the neck to the toes. And the baby is crying and he just said, say your kalma, say your shahada, the last words that we're supposed to say as Muslims. And she barely said them. She died. And then they kept shooting around him. After a while, they probably heard the IDF coming. They went and hid in this closet. He didn't know if his child was alive, that baby. He gets into the car and he looks at the baby and he thinks the baby's dead. The baby cries. He picks that baby up and he goes and hides in the same closet behind the Hamas terrorists. But he's Arabic. He hears the Arabic, and by some luck, he calls his commander brother in the Negev desert, and he tells the IDF, don't come here. They're here. They want to kill you. They're going to kill you. They don't hear him, and all of a sudden, IDF is coming, Hamas gets out, and he has to get out. He doesn't know what to do. He said, I have to choose how I want me and my baby to die. And I chose the Israelis. Of course, luckily he survived. His baby's okay. He came back and he said, go and tell people we are Muslims. That we were affected. They don't care. They're terrorists. They have a cult. They have an ideology of hate and murder and killing. They don't care about humanity. So when we came back and we told the stories of Muslims, you heard that story about a woman whose breasts were cut. It was so hard for me to sit in front of my Imam brothers who questioned me, sister, why aren't you with the Muslims? And I said, okay, let's talk about this. That woman, that story is all over, by the way. That story was out. People in India, Indian Muslims saw it. And this woman, when we were leaving, she's an Indian Muslim. She was at the Israeli Ben Gurion airport. She came to us. She looked at us and she said, these guys are Muslims. I'm going to talk to you. She said, sister, where are you from? She spoke to me in Hindi dialect. I said, I'm Pakistani Muslim from America. And she said, good that you're here. Go and tell the story. Did you see how they used Allahu Akbar to cut the breast of a woman, the most sacred part that feeds humanity, a baby. They cut it and they were smiling. Did you see that? She told me. Then she looked at me as a Muslim. I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed. But I had to say that story to all my brother imams and tell them, brothers, do you call that Islam? Do you think I did the right thing? That is Islam tells you to use Allahu Akbar and cut breasts of women? He said, that's it, don't tell us anymore. And we are with you. They are Ahle Kitab. And all the imams left. They didn't say a word. All they said was, build peace. Build peace. But when you come back to America and you find there are imams in California who have said the most heinous things. It is full of hatred. And what do you say to them? Let me tell you some of the things that the imams have been saying in America. And these are our patriarchal leadership. Dearborn, Michigan, Imam says, Israelis killed Palestinians and harvested their organs. I think he got confused because that's what the Chinese do to Uyghur Muslims.
Another one in Florida, Orlando, said, Jews are brothers of apes and pigs. Well, then so are we, because we are Abrahamic people. Another one said, planned genocide by Israel. Planned genocide by Israel. Really? And of course, there were many of them blaming the Jews for October 7th, as I said. Another imam in Maryland that I know, he said, great victory on October 7th. A professor in Kansas City said, amazing, amazing, miracle of Allah. It's not. And then one of them said, just a drill for what's coming next. A San Francisco imam. Big line, big line. Another imam in Warren, Michigan. Annihilate the Jews and their helpers. Kill them one by one. We're going to kill them like sheep. There's a PBS journalist who came to us. And she said, Anila, they were doing a documentary on us. Because we were we're the Muslim women fighting patriarchy within our own community and outside, standing up for women's rights across the world, especially in the Muslim world. PBS decided not to do that documentary on us because we believed women. I wouldn't even say Israeli women, we believed women. Because they were Muslim women, they were Gazan women. There were Egyptian Muslim women in the kibbutz who told us, go and tell them that we are Muslim. They came into our house. My children are Muslim, she said. Not that it matters. The PBS journalist said, they make everything up. So do you think that happened? What did you see? Did you see them cutting the breast of the woman? That was the last time I met her. And I decided not to communicate with such people who are journalists, take an oath to tell the truth. The only thing I told her, I said, listen, I went to Israel to bear witness. I think you should too, because you're a journalist, you should go there. That is what we are facing right now. So, pass it on.
Thank you. Well, so the question then we have is, as you point out, sexual violence has been used as a weapon of war for millennia. And it's unfortunately clear that believing women is selective. We have learned, especially since October 7th. So given all you've experienced, both of you, and all of the people you talk to, how do we fight against that, both for Jewish and Israeli victims and for others in other conflicts?
First of all, demand moral consistency. I mean, if we're going to have human rights organization, women organization, or feminism, it should be extended to everybody, like we said before. I think one of the issues with using rape in war is that it's not just affecting the war zone. I can tell you from my clients, for example, that experience sexual trauma, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, seeing this in the news and seeing that women are not being believed, then the message they're getting is we're not going to be believed as well. Not to mention the trauma aspect that I've already triggered, and I have a client, for example, who went through sexual trauma, and she's Israeli, and she lives in the US now, and she said that since October 7th, she keeps having flashbacks again, because we saw that this is the cameras of Hamas. What happened was that what used to be, we call it in trauma work, indirect exposure versus direct exposure, this is all direct exposure. So it's affecting communities, right? So we have to have this moral consistency to make sure that we all condemn that, no matter who's on the other side of it. The other piece of it is also that we need to make sure that we're being the gateways. So media, like you mentioned, Anila, right? Journalists, do their job. Actually do your job the right way. There is documentation, it's everywhere. The fact that it's selective which voice we're going to amplify is a huge problem. We need to make sure that those voices are being silenced, are being amplified. We need to make sure that we're bringing those people to events and that other people will bear witness, and not just the Jewish community. Everybody needs to bear witness. Because otherwise we're going to see it again, we're going to see it in other communities again and again and again. So we need to challenge them. And it's up to us, as Amit was saying, it's her calling. I would say it's every person who's sitting here, it's your calling as well to go outside after watching this and challenge people around you. Because silence is actually a stand. You're not being neutral by being silent. You're taking a specific stand by not speaking up. So I'm asking you to speak up. Because this is not just about October 7th. This is about the next war that's going to happen somewhere else in the world. And this is what people need to understand. This is not about Israel-Palestine conflict. Using sexual violence at war is just not acceptable, period. It's not justified, it's not excused, it is not acceptable.
You know, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you, CSUN, for fighting to get a diverse viewpoint. We seem to have lost the ability to listen to people that may not have the same viewpoint. And it's something that will bring our civilization down when we shut down diverse viewpoints. And it's so important to hear people. I can't tell you, as a women's rights organization, when we came into being, it was very simple. We walked into a lot of the mosques as Muslim women, and we would, think that we would be included, our viewpoints would be included. The majority of the mosques did not really want our viewpoint. They silenced us. I'm talking about after 9/11, because we were fiercely fighting Islamism, the Islamists. That wasn't our viewpoint. We came from very, very who you were and who you worshipped and how you worshipped. We came from that culture. We just wanted to live in America and just enjoy meeting people of different faiths. Our mosque did not allow our point of view. They did not allow us. Once I was there after 9/11, after the San Bernardino shooting, when the New York Times reporter came, Lori Goldstein, the imam got up and said, "Sister, go in the kitchen." So I said, I will, brother, later on, but right now I'm here. I know Lori wants to talk to me too. But not every woman has that courage. I had that because of my father. He was the founding father of a country called Pakistan. When I came here, he told me, speak up. If people don't listen to you, make your own organization. And that's what I have done. So as Muslim women, we've been fighting for 1400 years for rights. We say God gave us rights. Man took them away. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to Arabia to free women, to stop the killing of little babies. And look at Afghanistan. Look at Iran. How many of you stood at the protests for the Iranian women? I did too, for Neda, if you remember, so many years ago, 2015. I said, no, listen to her. The Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, listened to his wife. For God's sake, listen to women. They didn't allow us. So we said we're going to make our own organization. And we're going to have our own separate viewpoint. So here we are, fighting for our children, to grow up to love America, to live like everybody else, and to go to school and not be called a terrorist. We were silenced, each and every one of us. But we found strength in women's organizations. And sadly, a lot of them were Jewish organizations, and on October 7th, what happened? All these women's organizations who the Jewish people had supported, they didn't have anything to say. They were just not saying anything. And that's complicit. You have to take sides, even at the expense sometimes of your own life, like the Iranian regime. They don't want me to be alive because I speak. I just don't speak for my Israeli sisters. I speak for my Iranian sisters, my Afghan sisters. Since Taliban, I was 16 years old and I held, all these flags and saying, no, let women speak. Our Prophet gave us the right to speak. Because our motto is that God gave us rights. Don't take them away just because you're a man.
Thank you. So you mentioned, creating your own organization in order to combat this. I'm wondering, you also spoke about the silence of other women's organizations. So as a feminist, I deeply believe that women's rights are human rights. What changes can global women's organizations make to call out and prevent this kind of selective attention to sexual violence as a human rights issue?
First of all, accountability. I think that the organization needs to look inward. This is not, it's not a flaw to look inward and make changes. I think it actually takes a lot of courage to be able to say, we were wrong. We need to rebuild trust. I don't have trust in those organizations anymore. I lost my trust. We need to rebuild trust again. So looking inward, doing some trauma-informed work, right? They like to say they're trauma-informed. They're not trauma-informed if they're not actually using the right language, if they're not calling out the trauma. Be actually trauma-informed. Healing starts when we're acknowledging people's pain. Acknowledge the pain, right? Those survivors cannot move on with their life until they're being seen. See them. See their pain. Speak out about their pain. And I would also say that, again, with the trauma-informed, they need to do more training. They need to speak about traumatic invalidation, for example, because it was tested about other marginalized groups, just not Jews, because I guess we're not marginalized or minority. But we need to talk about it, and people need to be aware of that. It needs to be taught in the academia, and it needs to be speak about in journalism, and should be more research around it. Don't just leave it there. I think that when you think about the global organization and the human rights organization, specifically women organization, if they're not going to take steps to change what happened, if they're not going to stand up and say we were wrong, and this is exactly what we're going to do to change it, and be very open about what we're going to do to change it, I don't know how we're going to move forward. I don't know how we can continue. I mean, thank God for people like Anila, because let me tell you, this woman gives me hope. When we were talking that a few weeks ago at night, and I was in tears because no one else stands with us, right? So when you think about global, I think personal. It starts with one person that makes a difference. Anila is one of those people, for example, for me. She's restoring hope for me, along with other people that I work with as well. But if it doesn't start with the individual, then we can expect the global to change as well. And when I say individual, even for me as a trauma expert, I was not sexually assaulted other than kind of like, every woman experienced something. After October 7th, for weeks I couldn't have my husband touch me because of the stories. This needs to be acknowledged. There is this intergenerational trauma, there's epigenetic that has been going on that people are not talking about. Why? So, I guess long story short to your question, start individual, go global, hold people accountable, hold organization accountable, and be trauma-informed.
You're absolutely right. I don't know how long it took for us to come back from Israel, and after listening to all of these stories, to feel safe alone at home. I live alone in DC, and that day when I woke up after coming back, I had nightmares that what happened to these wonderful young ladies was happening to me. And that never happened to me. I've fought Taliban too. But to see the blood splattered in their homes, to know that they not only killed them, that they used machete after that to traumatize the family, raping the girls in front of the fathers, and to see that, it's hard to unsee it. And then for me, as I came back, and when we say our prayers in the morning, I wake up and I say my prayer, the first thing is Allahu Akbar. And to have that terrorist in my mind who's calling his mother and saying, only I killed 10 Jews with my bare hands, and then she calls the father and says, you're taking us all to heaven. And then he has, it was very hard to pray for me, it was really hard for me to have a relationship or even think about getting married again. But my sister was there that morning, Soraya. She just happened to say, Anila, I'm going to be in DC. I ran to my kitchen and I hugged her and I said, Soraya, thank God you're here. And that's secondary trauma. And that happens a lot as I hear stories. Also, when we were doing domestic violence, women get murdered. Muslim women have been murdered and burnt alive if they did not bring the dowry. You heard about the guy in New York. Father takes a little 14-year-old to Pakistan to have her killed because she wanted to wear like American clothes. That's happening today in the name of my religion. So yeah, this battle is personal to me. I love women. I am a woman. I have a daughter and I have 2 granddaughters. We have to think as mothers, as sisters, as women. We are a nation is known by its women. And when somebody hurts a woman and rapes her in front of her family, that's a message to the nation that we're going to bring your people down. It's no longer that woman. It's a nation. And we know that has happened. You saw nobody talked about this. The Syrian Alawite women that were just murdered. They are Sunni Muslim. Nobody talked about them. Yes, if you talk about all the women that have been abused and murdered and weaponized and raped, then fine, I won't say anything. But if you are like Code Pink, I went to Medea Benjamin and I said, Medea, you went to Afghanistan. You went with Taliban Khan, which is Imran Khan. And did you talk, you're a women's organization, did you talk about the right of education for those women? Now they can't even speak, their voices can't be heard publicly. I think they can't even, they're not even allowed to see in public. I said, did you talk about that? Because then, you know what, you can have a viewpoint here, I'll listen to it. She said, no, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to talk to you. Silencing, not wanting to listen to the other side. That's not going to get us women anywhere. And sadly, this won't be the last. Unless we globally unite and say, no woman ever deserves it. No woman ever deserves it. That's what we have to say. And until then, we are going to see this sadly.
Well, in keeping with what you just were saying, both of you, we have some audience questions. And the first one is very fitting. As a young person / adult, it is more common for us to become stubborn and only see one side. What do you have to say to the young people out there who care for both sides?
I think I was just saying that don't silence people. Listen to both sides. When I came to America, I came here to be free. Literally, I was living in Saudi Arabia. And I was just told that I was almost radicalized, and I was told, you should go to Saudi Arabia, convert people to Islam. And I said, no, that's not my job. My grandmother said, this is not what we do in Islam. So I used to challenge them. And I said, okay, I'm listening to them, but I'm going to read, I'm going to research, I'm going to think. God's given me a brain. Do that. Challenge viewpoints. You guys, a lot of you are in academia, you're the best place to be. Don't shut down voices, don't silence. Listen to both sides, because then you can be equipped to answer questions. And never hesitate to ask questions. I want you. You may not agree with me, fine, but at least ask me why I have a viewpoint, what happened in my life that I'm talking about this. Don't say, oh, she works for CIA or she works for FBI, because that's what we've been hearing since 9/11. We're okay with it. Talk to us. Listen to us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that just another plug about extremism and radicalization. Young people specifically are more vulnerable to extremism because their brain is not fully developed, so they tend to think in a black and white kind of way. When that happens, and unfortunately we've seen on college campuses, which a lot of the students, I happen I'm a teenager, they're losing their ability to think in a critical way. That's a problem. Academia should be about questioning, about holding different truths, about being curious, about actually reading books and articles and not just looking at TikTok. Because guess what? It is skewed. Okay, it was proven again and again and again. The media is choosing what to put out there. Same with the algorithm, it's all skewed. So they're going to see the same truth again and again and again and going to believe that this is what's happening. No. Ask questions. And like Anila was saying, people that are in it, like us, I want the debate. I want you to ask me the questions because then I can actually explain instead of you boycotting me. Instead of telling me that my voice doesn't matter, so I'm not actually going to listen to you. And I can't even start explaining how many times when I give talks about trauma just because of my last name, because I'm Israeli, or because I talk about anti-Semitism and trauma, people just don't show up. The people who show up are Jews. Actually, let me ask you, how many people in this audience is Jewish?
You don't have to answer that.
If you want. Sorry.
Sorry.
If you feel comfortable. My point is that I want the diverse crowd to come. I want people to be curious and ask questions and be brave and ask the question. Don't just believe me. You don't know me. Maybe I'm just bullshitting you all. Ask me those questions. Trust me, I will have an answer.
And on that note, ask it.
Yes. Guideline 7 invites us to focus on our shared humanity. How should we analyze how the claims in this documentary get leveraged to justify the dehumanization of Palestinians? How do we situate this film within the context of reports by Israeli human rights groups of the systematic use of violence, abuse, and torture in Israeli prisons? What would it mean to believe all women? How does rape get leveraged as a tool of war, including U.S.-backed Israeli war in Palestine?
Love this question. You want me to go first or you?
You go first. There's so many things.
Oh, there's so many different layers of it. I would start by saying this question just broke my points about traumatic invalidation. The end point of this movie was saying that anything against Palestinians. Anything of this movie dehumanized Palestinians or said anything about the war specifically, other than showing evidence of sexual trauma. If this movie was about any other community, if this was about other indigenous group, it was about black people, it was about LGBTQ, would you be asking this question? The fact that this question is being asked in that specific context, in a movie that is about sexual trauma, just proved the point about aboutism and about traumatic invalidation. Because you would not ask that question. You would see it as a movie to document sexual trauma and bring awareness to using rape as a war, as a weapon of war. So I would say this person who asked this question might want to ask themselves about their own hidden biases. What else is happening? And did we not actually say that we believe all women? Me or Anila, did we say we don't believe Muslim women? In fact, Anila was talking specifically about a Muslim woman, about a family from Gaza. So the fact that people are already assuming that when we're having this event, it's about just putting out Israeli propaganda and Jewish propaganda, shuts down the conversation. Don't shut down the conversation. Hold the dialectic of both truth. It's not a competition of pain and suffering. I can acknowledge that what's happening in Gaza is awful. War is absolutely awful. Absolutely. And if sexual violence happening in Israel, it is awful and I condemn it. This is not what this is about. And the fact that we need to name it is a huge problem. This question right here, that is traumatic invalidation.
You answered a very important point, so I'll answer something differently. We have been to Gaza and the West Bank, Ramallah, Jenin. I don't know for how many years, 10 years. We've been taking groups of students through the Olive Tree Initiative program, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, from all different nationalities, students to that region to learn for themselves what the conflict is. And most of the students come back and they see how complicated it was. I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago when we were working on campuses. But they come back with something that we've been talking about, viewpoints. They realize that these are two people, children of Abraham, that live next to each other, that need to learn to live together. One side wants to live. The other side, like on October 8th or October 7th, thinks that the only way they can live is by killing the other. That's not going to work. And when I spoke to Anila Ali, the Palestinian leaders, many, many years ago, and I said, let's do Abraham Accords is the answer. It's like we're the same people. We believe in the same God, for God's sake. And it's very hard, the dynamics, you know. You speak to the people from Palestinian Authority, you speak to Fatah, you speak to people from Hamas, because that was the legitimate government. That's what the Gazans chose for themselves. 2005, Israel gave Gaza away. And 2007, there were elections and they chose Hamas. And the Fatah said, we didn't like that. Palestinian Authority said, we didn't like that. They had their own internal issues. But Gaza was fine. They were there. What was brewing was this radical ideology that perhaps many people didn't know about. And they were just thinking, oh, that's the only way. But there's always another way. And there is always that one way, and that's conversation. Let's sit together, which is what we were doing. Ask the Arab countries, how many of them let the Palestinians in? How many? Nobody. Why? Why? Why didn't they? How many Muslim countries let the Palestinians in? Why? The best friends that the Palestinians had, the Gazans, were the liberal kibbutzim people, like my friend Vivian Silva. They burnt her alive in her house. I was going to be there on October 7th with my Palestinian Sunshine sisters. We were all going to fight for peace. They didn't want that. They didn't want Abraham Accords because they really are a death cult. And so to say that, this is an attack on the Palestinians or Gazans, or you're not thinking about the Palestinians, we were accused of that. And we said, who's done more? To name a Muslim women's organization that has done more to bring peace between Palestine than our organization. Because we knew that was going to be used as a wedge issue. We did a lot, but you didn't let young people listen to both sides. You canceled them, you shut them out, just like you shut us out. You didn't want to hear what we were saying. When my students used to come back to Israel from their campuses from Israel, they were ostracized. I'm talking about 2014, 15, 16. It was hard for them to tell their parents. They were Arab kids. There's a Syrian girl who said, please talk to my mom. I want to go and learn the truth. I want us to have peace. Why is it like that? Why is it that we shut the other side down, especially on liberal campuses? Why do we do that? What are you afraid of? The truth? Or are you afraid that there is another side that you are trying to silence? And that is the voice of many Palestinians, like 22-year-old. You heard his name, Odai Nasser Sadi. He's a hero. He came out and he said, free Gaza from Hamas. They got it. Those kids got it. What did they do to him? They took him, killed him, rope around his neck, dragged him all around Gaza, and then threw his body in front of his house and said, this is what we do to people that speak up against Hamas. So, we need to do things differently. This is not working. And this is not about hurting one side and not listening to the other. This is about coming together and saying there is a way out. Let's find that. The liberals have been the best advocates. Look at the liberal campuses in America. They've been the best advocates
They forgot something. They forgot that there's a way out. That there's a better life for the Palestinians, and that's without Hamas. That is without terrorism, and that's when they also acknowledge life is beautiful. You can't raise kids and say that's my way out, fast track to heaven. No, and I have talked to Muslim mothers. I have talked to women in Janine, and I've said, sister, wake up, Islam doesn't say that. They told me, be quiet, they'll kill you. I said, no, I'm going to say this. I'm a woman, I'm a mother. No, Islam doesn't say that. Don't, rebel, speak up. And many of them couldn't speak up. But there is a mother, she's in Ramallah, and she's been speaking out. Right? Those are the heroes. On the other side, that are speaking. A guy who died, and this girl is hanging on. She's saying, Allah. Right. Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing to this question? Yeah. Just one more thing. Because this is a very important question, whoever brought it up. Thank you. I lost my thought. Yalla. Hold on, let me grab my thought. Sarah!
Well, she said the word peace, and it was the
I know,
right time to end.
I know. Oh, I got it. Back to the story. So, to the point about the double standards and the two sides, and why are we talking about it, right? Listening to a voice doesn't negate the other voices. I can tell you that when I went to Israel to volunteer, I went to do a workshop about trauma in one of the mental health hospitals over there, and with another faculty member. And when this was posted online, people started telling her that she should be fired, you're a dirty Zionist, you're, all of the stuff that we hear all the time. And when I read those comments, my mind went to, I don't understand, since when helping one group of traumatized people is actually hurting another group of traumatized people. So when I heard this question, that's not like the memory it took me to. Watching this movie and bearing witness to sexual trauma and taking a stand against sexual trauma does not negate other suffering. It just shows humanity exists everywhere. It's being able to hold suffering. It's being able to hold the dialectic and the truth to everything. And I can say peace so we can finish on peace. Good luck, Sarah.
I have never needed a microphone in my life. Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. I want to quickly say, first, thank you for asking questions to all of you in the audience. I understand that we did not get to all of the questions. In fact, we only got to a couple of them. If it makes you feel any better, we